Hi everybody, welcome. So my name is Azid. I'm a property investor, coach and an author, and I've been doing this for over 20 years. I mainly coach now on title splitting projects and help people to get the most out of their title splitting and coaching them through the actual start of what to look for, but all the way out and how to exit with leaving as little as possible of their own money out of the deal, and ideally then leaving passive income for the future. In terms of my contact details, I will post that in the next section of this video, but you can contact me regarding title splitting or, quite frankly, any kind of property development coaching that you might need. I have and hold HMOs, single buy-to-let, service accommodation, and I buy blocks of flats and land with accommodation on it or houses on it, with the idea of splitting those away from the actual land itself. So I do title splitting of land as well. So if you've got any learning needs, please feel free to drop me an email or join our Facebook group. And there I discuss quite a lot of specific cases, and we have a great amount of contributors as well on the group. You will see the link below as well. So this video, I thought I'd put together to share an end-to-end project where we looked at a project for somebody to buy and conduct a title splitting process around, and to then educate around how much would the offer price should be, what kind of cost it will take to refurbish and title split, and also then what kind of timelines it will take to do all of this, with the ideal output of being profit at the end. And I will discuss two different options of exit. One is where you buy and hold and then you rent, and the second one is you buy the block, you title split, you refurbish, and then you sell. So those two will be separate kind of scenarios that I will take you through in this video. So let's look at the scenario next. So the scenario here is where we have a block of flats, 23 flats specifically, 2 beds and a 3 bed. And the asking price right now on this is 2.5 million. The seller is actually valuing these flats at 2.5 million. So on average, he is estimating that each flat is worth around £108,000 each. So that's your first kind of phase. So what does a seller actually value this as, and what do they think it's worth? And here I've just taken 2.5 million divided by 23, and I've got to 108,000 on average per flat. The second segment of evaluation now, where I coach and I help people evaluate their deals, is the buyer evaluation. So really, how much is it actually worth to us? And to do that, here I've asked, so I look at the actual block itself. So the block is block of 23 flats. On average, the condition is not that great, but it's not that dire either. But it is tired and it will need updating. Put it in another way, if the surveyor came out today to look at it, they will not be valuing it to the market rate that it could potentially get if we were to buy it, renovate it, and to a certain standard. The other bit of this is the most important bit is actually it's still on a one freehold title. So all 23 flats sit within one block, which then sits on one title deeds at land registry. This is clearly ripe for title splitting, so things that we actually really want to be doing. So the next thing to do is work out your offer price. So based on what the seller wants, we need to work out, well, what is it worth to us? To do that, we need to really then work out, well, if we need to move from scenario A, which is current state of flat, to scenario B, which is refresh state of flat, where we're creating more value so that when the surveyor comes, they value it higher. We need to estimate how much these refurb will cost. So here in this scenario, I've guesstimated we've experienced and having done this many times, roughly around £15,000 is what we're going to tell the seller it's going to cost us to refurbish each and every flat, which is, it's not excessive, but it's also not crazily low either. So we are trying to educate the seller as to what our new offer price will be and why it's based on, what is it based on. So here we're going to tell him, it's £15,000 on average that we guesstimate this will cost us for each and every flat to refurbish, new kitchen, new bathroom, flooring, painting, etc., etc. So I take the 15,000 per flat times 23 flats, I arrive around 345,000. Then the next bit of cost is around legals, title split, refinance costs. So roughly speaking, I've kind of again allocated around £60,000 of cost to that. Again, not too excessive. So that brings a total cost that we're going to tell the seller that it will cost us today to buy this and get it to a point where we need to get it to around 405,000. So let's ballpark it around 400,000. So then in order to be able to then negotiate with the seller, we go in with an offer of 2.5 million, which is what he wants, minus the 400,000 that we think is going to cost us to actually renovate this place. And then we come up and arrive at a 2.1 million pound offer price. This basically means that each flat on average we are valuing at £91,000. Now, if I remind you that the seller valued it at £108,000 per flat, we are coming up at a 91 valuation per flat, based on the condition, based on the works that needs to be done, and the current state of the actual flats themselves, and even the actual block, the communal areas and everything. So 108,000 take away 91 that we think it's worth. So we're asking on average a £17,000 discount for each flat. So that's currently where we're at with and how to work out an offer price. So in the next segment, we're going to talk about how we finance that purchase. So assuming that we are going to get a 2.1 agreement as a purchase price, how do we finance this? So loosely speaking, we will need 25% deposit on the 2.1 million purchase price. That roughly equates to around 525,000. So if you first kind of rate limiting fact, really, if you're going down this route of financing this by yourself, you really need to be in it for around £500,000 to begin with. So you'll need the 525 as your deposit for the lenders to lend you the 75% remaining, which then they will lend at 1.57, so £1,575,000 remaining. Ballparking, currently you can get rates of around 4%, so you will be paying 4% on the 1.5 million, which is roughly £63,000 per year of interest only. That works out to be about £5,250 per month. The current rent, as it is in that condition as it is, the seller declares that it's earning on average £12,500 worth of rental income. So scenario one, if you were buying this and you were buying it as a mortgage with a bridger or something like that, or some mortgage items, or even, if you were looking for investor finance and you were paying your investors 4%, you will be in it for around 500 grand as your deposit. You borrow the rest, they cost you around £5,250, but the rental income is £12,500. So right now on this scenario, you'll be making a £7,000 profit per month. So in the next segment, we will look at the other scenarios. So as part of title splitting, your aim is to buy it as low as possible, negotiate the lowest price you can, which we've just talked about how we come up to an offer price, and justify it to the seller, not just give them a number, justify why you are arriving at that price. The second segment of making money and creating value, and to do that in title splitting in blocks of flats, you really need to then up the value of these flats. To do that, you need to then spend the money to move it from the condition that it is, that you're valued at £91,000, to a condition that a surveyor will value it at a much higher price. So in this scenario, then we're looking at 23 flats that we will need to revalue, to refurbish rather. So if you looked at the first segment, I talked about what offer do we put in. We then guesstimated to the seller that it will cost us £15,000 to renovate each and every flat. Quite frankly, as an experienced person, I will be looking to spend no more than £10,000 if I'm block negotiating with a contractor to take on 23 flats to renovate, new kitchen, new bathroom. I will source a lot of the stuff. You know, you can get these prices down significantly lower than 15,000. But for the purpose of this video, I've arrived at a £10,000, which I think a lot of people, even you're kind of newish coming into the market, can actually achieve a £10,000 per flat refurb cost. So working on a £10,000 refurb cost, as well as a fee for legals, title split, and other costs that will come with it, I've allocated in this scenario around 450,000. So if we bought at 2.1, then 360,000. If we bought at 2.1, we spend 360,000, 300 on the refurb, 60 grand also on the legals and everything else. We get a 2.46 million pound cost to us. 2.1 to buy it, 360 to renovate and do all the works. It's now cost us 2.46 million. So what happens next? Once we've done this, we will ideally then get it revalued. We'll get the surveyors out, we approach banks, and we get all of the 23 revalued. 99% of the time, you're going to need a few lenders to take on this 23. Very rarely, actually, I can't think of any banks that will take a 23 flat in one block as one interest. So you will approach, let's say on average, say 5 banks, refinance on average 4 with each of them, 4 to 5 with each of them. And you get a surveyor to come out, and hopefully then using property data, using some other data analytics that I use, I see that if we can get it to a decent spec, each of these flats could easily revalue around 130 to up to 140,000 pounds, depending on square meterage and the spec. But I am a conservative type of person. I tend to want to be conservative in my numbers. So I've used a lower valuation here. So I say after the valuation, after the refurb and the works, how much am I expecting this block and these flats to be worth? I've used 130,000 and I times that by 23 flats. That gives me a 2.99 million pound valuation. So just to round up, we will say it's a £3 million valuation. So here you have a scenario where you bought it for 2.1, you spent 360, so a total of 2.46, you get it revalued at 3 million. There is a new value created at 540,000 pounds. So in the next segment now, I'll talk about how you can then finance these another way away from banks, and we will talk about vendor finance and some of the lease options. So how do you buy this potentially without mortgages and bridging finance, but you approach the vendor and get them to agree a lease options and vendor finance? So the way you will look at, like, basically, potentially you will say, okay, you will have an agreement, say up to 12 months for you to come in and do all the works and refurbish it, agree in advance the price. Let's assume for this argument that we will still agree a 2.1 million purchase. The way then that it will work is that after the 12 months of work, so 6 months of work, let's say, programs of work, you have it revalued. Remember, we said it's going to revalue at 130,000 per flat on average, 23 flats, £3 million valuation for the block. You then start the refinancing. So your company starts buying these flats from the vendor, and you ask for a 25% you leave a 25% deposit on each flat. On average for the block, you will be leaving £750,000 as an aggregate. So you will be borrowing £2.25 million from your lenders across the 23 flats as mortgage, interest-only mortgages. You take the 2.25 million, you pay your vendor now, and you pay him off. You buy him completely on the completion date. You give him the money as you remortgage out on these 23 flats. You give him the 2.1. That leaves you a gain of £150,000. So right now you're up at 150,000 after all the 23 has been bought by your company via refinancing. Having said that, you have spent some money to get it to that spec. Remember, you spent 300,000 on refurbished cost, as well as 60,000 on legals and other expenses. So you take the 150,000 you made as a profit, you take away from the 360,000 of cost that you've spent, that leaves you a deficit of 210,000 that it has cost you to get to this position. So what does that mean? So it just means that right now you have left £210,000 as a deposit on a £3 million valued block of flats. So really you're looking at almost 15% deposit that you've left in, a bit less than that. So right now you've left in about 200,000, but in the next segment, I'm going to talk about, well, what do you get? What kind of return on investment did you get on those 210,000 that you leave, and how long do you need to leave it in before you can recycle that money back out again? So we've just talked about that here in this scenario with vendor finance, and by the time you pay the vendor, it would have cost you in the region of £210,000 that you've left in the deal so far. So what happens next? So let's assume you do leave your £210,000 deposit. Now, bearing in mind, in this scenario, you started off with a much higher deposit to buy the place. So in the other scenarios, but in this scenario, because you used in vendor finance, you use the vendor's time and your agreement with the lease options to let you do the refurb. So at the end, you leave 210,000 in this deal. So what happens next? So you would then be owning a £3 million block, left £210,000 in, but that block is generating income. As it is, it will be generating on average £193,000 a year. So that will be roughly costing you. That will be making on average £16,000 per month across the block. If you're borrowing 2.25 million to on this block because you used 750,000 as deposit, part of that 750 has come from the new value you've created, but your interest only on this block is 2.25 million at a 4% interest rate, give or take. That will cost you 7,500 per month. So your income is 16,000, 7,500 is your interest only payment. I've allocated around £2,000 per month, which is quite a lot for management costs. But let's assume we are being overly cautious. So 7,500 interest only, £2,000 management cost to manage the 23 block, because we want to keep it to a very good standard. So we attract the right rent, the right tenants. That then gives you a cost of 9,500, leaving a profit per month of 6,500 after you've paid all your costs. So you times that by 12, that gives you a net rental income on this block now of £78,000 per year. So to go back to your 210,000 that you've left in the deal, what does that look like in terms of return on investment? Well, you take 78,000 that you're making, you divide that by 210,000 you left in, that gives you on average a 37% return on that money, which basically means after 3 years of renting that block, you would have paid yourself back that £210,000. But in the next segment, we're going to talk about, well, what happens once we come to refinance after 3 years, and what happens to that 210,000. So let's wait for that, for the next segment on that. So in this section, we're talking about now the same deal, but if we were not going to refinance and hold and rent, what if we did all the works that we've talked about so far, but we bought it, did the works, created the leases, and then sold them over a period of time? What would that look like? So we start at a £3 million valuation, because now everybody knows where that numbers come from. The values have come in. They valued each flat on average 130,000 because of the programs of work we've done in. 130,000 times 23 gives you roughly £3 million. That, to achieve that £3 million valuation, is cost us some money. So it's cost us 300,000 in terms of refurb costs, legals, and etc. Has cost us around 60,000. Then it's also cost us, I've allocated a year's worth of finance cost, because by the time we buy it and then do the works, and then start selling them, it would have taken a good amount of time. Bearing in mind you're trying to sell 23 flats in one go, you don't want to be doing it straight away in 1 month, because that will crash the prices, because the availability on the market will be so high. So you'll be drip feeding those sales over a period of time. But let's allocate a 12-month sale period for that. That then cost us around 90,000 to be borrowing that money with banks to then sell, and as we sell them, we start paying the money back. So the cost-wise is 360,000 plus 90,000 of finance costs. That's 450,000. Plus also is we have to add the purchase price, which then which is 2.1 million, which then gives us a total outlay of 2.55 million over the 12-month period. So you revalue, you get them to a point where they all combined value is 3 million. It costs you 2.55 now to get to that 3 million pound value. So this means that over the 12-month period, by selling all of the flats, you will realize a profit of around 450,000 once the 23rd flat has been sold, which is not a bad deal whatsoever. We're talking, you know, rounding it, we're talking almost £500,000 worth of profit that you could walk away with with this project. Yes, it has taken you 12 months or so, maybe a bit longer sometimes, depending on how quickly you can sell those 23 flats. But ultimately, listen, you know, it is £500,000, you know, whether it's taking 12 months or 18 months, you are still going to be walking away with a very healthy profit. So in the next segment, this is going to be the last segment, I will then summarize this deal and share with you again the two scenarios, and then we can talk about next steps. So this is the final segment of this trail of videos around this title splitting block of flats, of 23 flats. And hopefully now you would have learned how to buy it, how to put an offer that will counter the seller's price that's on the market, how to work that out, but also how to work out how much it will cost you if you were to buy it on a mortgage. And currently, obviously, you're making money with the rent versus what it's costing you, what kind of monthly profit you will be making. The other bit you will have learned from the trail of videos that I've put together here is how do you then work out a refurb cost, and more importantly, what kind of revaluation can you expect, how to look for these data, and basically come up with a value that you are comfortable that the surveyors that comes out after the work that you've done would value it at the same price. We then also talked about vendor finance and how that route might look like, and what kind of deposit you might be leaving in the deal, but more importantly also what kind of return on investment on that money left in you can expect, and how over 3 years you would have paid off the actual money left into that deal. So we also then covered around, you know, if you were to buy it, do the works and sell it, and we spoke about how that you would need at least 12 to 18 months to do that, because you couldn't put 23 flats in one hit and expect a high rate of 130,000 per flat, because the market will be saturated. So you would have to phase it over a period of time. But if you did do that in that scenario, that would also then yield you a healthy profit of just around £500,000. So in summary, you have two main two main considerations really. One, do you buy and hold, or you buy and sell? The title splitting still is relevant to both scenarios. Whether you buy to rent, you will then title split it, create leases for the 23 flats, refinance it, get the high valuation, and then rent them, and then make that monthly income. The second bit is if you buy to sell, you will still buy, title split, refurb, get a higher valuation and sell at a higher price, and then take your money out of that deal that way. So title splitting is a great way of making quite considerable profits out of large block of freehold flats. In this scenario, we're talking about flats, but you know, you can do it on land, you can do it on garages or anything like that. So depending on what the asset you're looking at, title splitting and creating leases and freehold and leases is a great way of making substantial profits in properties, and it is a strategy that I teach quite a bit. I post quite a lot of videos now on my Facebook title splitting properties group. I've also got an Instagram account that you can then follow, and you will see the link in the post here. And you can also email me azid@qualitygroup.co.uk if you've got any questions, or you can check out my coaching page and my coaching program to see what is it that I offer, and if that is something that you would like to have a chat on, please reach out. So until the next video, thank you for watching. My name is Azid, and I'm part of Quality Group, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Ciao.